like, man, there's so many people around my neighborhood that just have not even heard the gospel, who there's so many needs. And so there is a kind of a crisis, I think, that we live in this very, very comfortable Western Christianity where we can go to church and come home, but then being the presence of God, hosting the presence of God in your home and in your neighborhood, and being the salt and light to your neighbors is not something that's like high on the radar. I feel like sometimes we can just easily check off, you know what I'm saying? Like, what would happen if we didn't just go to church, but we were the church in our communities? I think we'd see a lot of change.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Creative Circle podcast. I'm your host, Luke Flex. Today, I have with me a very, very special guest. I have with me Ryan Henry. Ryan, how are you doing?
Man, I'm just feeling awesome today. It's so good to be here, man. It's good to be with you and have a chance to really just kind of sit down and talk and do what I love to do, is just like meet with people and just chat. It's just awesome.
So Ryan, give the people just a quick 30-second spiel on kind of what you're doing, the things you're up to, and the projects you're working on.
Oh boy, okay. Well, so my biggest project is how do you be a father? So I'm working on that one as an ongoing thing. My wife Mary and I have we've been married for 15 years.
Wow.
And it's been awesome. It's been a great ride, and she's just an amazing woman of God, and huge encouragement. And we have 7 kids ourselves, ranging from age 13 all the way down to our grand finale, the twins. And so yeah, family life is a big thing, but man, I love writing music. We produced an album a couple years ago. I'm also a school teacher, so I put a lot of my time into directing choirs and teaching kids K through 5 in Naperville, teaching music. I also teach with Young Naperville Singers in Naperville as well, and I direct 2 choirs with that organization. And then I love podcasting, which is kind of an unforeseen love that I did not realize I had. I got an invite to host the 180 podcast through One Way Ministries, which is all about people sharing their testimonies. So that's been really cool. And I love building stuff, man. I just love creating stuff, building stuff. We do gardening, landscaping in my house, and just a lot of different things that I'm really passionate about. Hosting people is another thing. So you'll kind of probably hear a little bit more about that as we continue to talk. That might have been 45 seconds. I'm sorry about that.
No, I love that all. What's the problem though with not sharing the gospel with your neighbors?
The problem with what? Oh man. Well, can I just kind of start a little bit from the beginning with that subject? So, I had some time to really just start reflecting about, what does it mean to live this Christian life? I think when I was fairly young, I would, just kind of think like, well, to be a Christian, like, and to do something for the Lord, it looks really big. It's like a big thing. Like, it means getting on an airplane and flying to a country and being terrified, but, courageous, that I'm going to go share the gospel with this, people who have never heard it before. But then I started reflecting and just realizing that, like, man, there's so many people around my neighborhood that just have not even heard the gospel, who there's so many needs. And so there is a kind of a crisis, I think, that we live in this very, very comfortable Western Christianity where we can go to church and come home, but then, being the presence of God, hosting the presence of God in your home and in your neighborhood, and being the salt and light to your neighbors is not something that's like high on the radar. I feel like sometimes we can just easily check off, you know what I'm saying? Like, I went to church, or if you're really, really spiritual, I went to church and I went to a weekly Bible study, and you check it off and you're done. But what about the question that I had is, what does this look like from a day-to-day basis? Like there's people suffering from depression, anxiety, loneliness, rejection, insecurities, all these things all around me. And so what am I doing? So I think there is a crisis as far as the gospel being shared in our neighborhoods, because the power, like Paul says in Romans 1:16, he's like, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everybody who hears it. And so, I definitely see kind of a crisis in the fact that it's more so I like to phrase it in a positive way. What would happen if we didn't just go to church, but we were the church in our communities? I think we'd see a lot of change.
Tell me about the Turquoise Table, this massive, I don't know if it's 12 feet long table you have in your front lawn.
Yeah. So this concept by Christian Shell, she's this is a woman who's on a mission to love her neighbors. She put out this picnic table in her front yard, and she painted it turquoise. And if I remember correctly, I think she did it for like a birthday party of her kids. And then I think it might have been in the backyard originally, but then she was like, we're going to move that to the front yard. And then she just began to invite neighbors and friends and strangers to basically just hang out at the table and have coffee and have meals and stuff. So I read this book. Actually, I take that back. I did not read the book. I've read parts of it and listened to parts of it, but a friend of mine told me about it. And I was like so inspired. I'm like, we have got to do this. We had just moved into a new neighborhood. We needed to meet people, and I'm like, we have to do this. So I got my mom's old picnic table and I painted it turquoise. And this is like the first year that we moved in, and I was actually doing my master's program at that time, and so I had a lot of studying to do. And so what I would do is I would just sit out at the table. And it speaks loudly. It's turquoise. It's very, very, very visual, So I would sit out there and I have, candle or so and some coffee set, and I would just work on my master's thesis out there. And man, I met so many amazing people that way. People who are walking their dogs, and a lot of those people today are a part of our community. And when I say our community, like our regular, we host pretty much twice weekly. 2 times on Thursdays and Saturdays. And we pretty much just open doors to our neighbors, And a lot of those people, I would actually say all those people I met by being out at the table. And it was so awesome. Now today, I felt like the Lord a couple years ago, kind of funny. I have to tell this story because I think it's really cool. I started thinking about Noah's Ark. One night when we had a whole bunch of neighbors over, and I was like, Lord, am I supposed to share the story of Noah's Ark? Like, what am I supposed to do with it? And I didn't, because I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to do with it. But as I started thinking about Noah's Ark, for some reason, I started also thinking about building a bigger table. And so I was like, Mary, I told Mary, I was like, I think we're supposed to build a bigger table. And being, supportive as she is, she's like, okay, so like, how big are you talking about? I'm like, well, I found a plan for this 14-footer.
14 foot, wow.
14, yes. Dude, this table is massive. It is so awesome. It's like my pride of like anything I've ever built. It's got legs that are like this big. And we built this 14-foot table and like 14-foot benches. It's like 7 foot, 4 different benches, 7 feet for each bench. And it's right in our front yard. So it did replace the turquoise table. It's not loud because of the color. It's loud because of its size. People walk by and they're like, whoa, what the heck is that? Man, this bro's got a huge table in the front yard. And the interesting thing, Luke, is that I do think there's a correlation between why the Lord was putting Noah's Ark on my mind and the table. First of all, it's huge. Second of all, it's made out of wood. Third of all, Noah's Ark, you can guarantee that there was a presence of the Lord with Noah and his family on that ark. Noah's Ark speaks of Jesus, the one who saves humanity from the wrath of God, And so when I think about that in terms of a table, I think, Lord, I want this table to host your presence. I want this table to be one that brings salvation to humanity, that saves people from their wrath. Now, we know that a table can't do that, but I tell you what can is the conversations that happen over the table, the hospitality that happens over the table, a cup of coffee that is served, and that makes somebody go, man, what's the purpose behind all of this, you know? One of the cool things, Luke, that happened was after I built this table, and we actually had to wheel it out there, um, we had to get this little dolly and like just slowly wheel it because it's literally massive. I had I feel like two neighbors walked by when I was out there, and they're like, for whatever reason, like I just think about like Noah's Ark when I see this table. And I'm like, what?
That's hilarious.
You've got to be kidding me. Literally, are you serious? And I can't remember if I shared with them the backstory about that, but that was like the kindness of the Lord to tell me, like, yes, you were supposed to build this table, and it is going to be a place where the presence of God can just linger through conversation and the love that is shared here. So how cool is that?
That's incredible. Is the your neighbors and the people in your community, are they Christians or are most of them not? Or like, as you've had all these conversations, have you been able to kind of scope out, okay, kind of where people are at spiritually?
Yeah. I do. I kind of scope that out, and we have a great combination. We have, we have people. It's interesting because there's an increasing Christian presence in my neighborhood, and it's really neat because years ago I had a dream, and in this dream it was so bold and so impactful. Like my wife and I actually first misunderstood the dream, and to the point where like we were ready to move right then. But in this dream, the Lord showed me a place that He was taking us. He showed me a Google Map bird's eye view of where we were going.
Wow.
I remember seeing this blue thing, the shape of an ear, and I remember feeling like the Lord. I didn't know if it was roads or whatever it was, but I remember seeing water like on a map. You know, like when you're looking at Google Maps, you can see the roads and stuff. Well, the cool thing is that in this dream, we're standing on this this field, okay, and there's all these trenches of water, and I knew that the Lord was moving us here, and there was a guy who was kind of like a tour guide, and he said, you're going to be moving here, but you can't move here yet. The ground is too wet. We can't build here yet. But there was all these other people with us. And he said, but the time will come where you can come. And then I woke up.
Wow.
I was like, whoa, that's really cool. Bro, I have to tell you, I didn't realize this. We had this crazy testimony about getting this house that we moved. That was in 2015, I think, that I had that dream. And then we moved, I don't even remember. We've been there for 4 years, 2020. So 2018, I think, or 2017. We're coming up on 5 years, so I think we moved 2017. But anyway, so we got this house, and it was a crazy cool testimony that's a whole different podcast in itself. But after we moved here, we looked and we saw, like on the Google Maps, the same ear, that shape of an ear, literally is the lake behind my house. If you look in where Chesterfield Park is, there's a lake there, and it's the shape of an ear. It is crazy. And not only that, but remember in the dream I said there's all these other people around me that were moving. The Lord has been bringing people who are Christians into the neighborhood, like one after the other, which is so exciting for me. I'm like, dude, it's like there's help.
Yeah.
It's not just up to my family. And so part of my task, I feel like, is to build connections and community within the Christians in the neighborhood so that we can have a really strong presence and love together. Because there are a lot of people who don't know the Lord in the neighborhood. Or I would say people who have gone to church or who are kind of, religious. They've done the thing, but that personal relationship with Christ is just not there,
Yeah, I think oftentimes, like when we get saved or someone becomes a Christian, they can often be left, and there's no discipleship. There's
my gosh, yeah.
Now because of my changed heart, now I do good things because of the verdict, not because of some performance or anything like that, but it's because of the verdict that we already have in Christ, right? Like any other religion, that's the coolest comparison. Christianity is so different than being Muslim or being even an atheist or Buddhist. It's all about performance. They're hoping that by the end of everything that they do, they will get some sort of verdict
Right.
that says, yep, you're
Yeah.
good.
You're good or
And in
not. Yeah.
Christianity, it's no, we already got the verdict. Jesus has already been in the courtroom. And
Praise
because of
God.
that, we can now do
Yeah.
those things, not because we're trying to work on our salvation to save ourselves,
Yeah.
but because of the outpouring of it. And that's what I love
Yes.
about it. It's like, it's not about yes, faith. Faith that works is dead. All right. I'm not
Yeah.
saying you can't just be like, well, I don't have to
Can't
do anything
coast.
now, but it's no longer, you don't feel condemned or anything by like, or feel like you have to
Yeah.
work for your salvations through Christ
Right.
alone.
Right. But I love what you said about, discipleship. Bro, that is like my heart. And I'm like constantly, like, Lord, would you teach me how to do this? Because really it's your Holy Spirit that makes disciples, but it's your Holy Spirit in me. And, seeing people kind of, come to the Lord. I love evangelism. And I love the idea of, preaching to the masses. Someday I would hope to be able to share the gospel on a stage with, millions of people. That'd be so awesome.
Yeah.
But I have a problem in the sense that I am not comfortable with sharing the gospel with somebody, especially somebody who's close to me in my neighborhood, and then just leaving them out to dry. Like, I want them to know that we, as our family, we are here, we're present, we're not going anywhere. Like, you are welcome at our table. We can, just do this thing together that, they don't have to walk this road alone. And that just takes time. Discipleship is,
Yeah.
making disciples, it says to make disciples. That's not converts, that's disciples, people who essentially obey Christ. That takes a lot of time. And that's something that I'm realizing is that even now, being 4 years in our neighborhood, there have been neighbors who have come to Jesus, and it's been awesome, but it has taken a lot of time. It's taken, building trust. It's taken bringing them into our household. It's taken things happening in their own lives that have drawn them to their knees. Like, it's a whole big picture. And so my desire is just to put ourselves in people's stories, however the Lord wants to use us. If it's to share the gospel and just to get them saved, then that's what we're needed for. Awesome. If it's to wait and to be there for the long haul, then that's okay too. But just to be present however we can, however people need us. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Like, as Christians, we should, there are times where we need to be ready in 30 seconds to be able to share the gospel, give a quick message. The person's
Yeah.
ready. We're having a conversation. All of a sudden, it's gone down a really deep, serious conversation, and they're looking for hope. Maybe they confided in you, and they're like, "Hey, man, I'm really struggling with this, da 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 da." And for you to be like, "Oh, you're okay," like, that's ridiculous. Like, we need to
Yeah.
be able to quickly share what the truth is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, right, once they become a Christian or on that process, being able to disciple them and taking
Yeah.
time. And that takes, it's sacrifice. Because now,
Right.
if you're in part of any sort of ministry, you know that like people are needy. I'm needy. I need people
Yeah.
to constantly remind me of truth. Like
Yeah.
Monday, I'm feeling great. And by Wednesday, I'm like, man, I need to be reminded of truth, And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why we have church. That's why we have youth group for, teens. And then that's why we have community groups for the parents
Yeah.
and kids
Yeah.
so that everyone can be like, hey, man, this is what's really going on. This is what's really going on in my marriage. This is what's really going on in my life. And, here's kid, like, help me out with this sin. Like, here's what's going on.
Yeah, and that just, it really does take a tremendous amount of time. And here, the hard thing that I see is that we live in a culture that, generally speaking, does not understand what it means to wait and to be patient. And I liken it to this: how crazy would we think a farmer is if he went out to the field, put his seed down, and stood over and was like, "Come on, grow!" He's like dumping water on it. He's like, like kind of like shining his flashlight on it, like, "Come on, do it!" Like, that would be insane. But praise God for farmers who know how to, like, put a seed in and have faith that in the harvest time there will be a harvest. It's such a simple thing, but it's such a simple parable, but it means everything to me. So over the last few years, I've learned to not take things personally. Like, one of the things I think that is really important when it comes to sharing the gospel is know that you are going to be rejected. Know that you are going to be speaking to somebody and they will not understand what you're saying. They will disagree with you. They might even nod your head and be like, yeah, that's nice. But like, you can feel when there's a little bit of resistance. Like, sometimes that means that they kind of, they stay a little bit away from you, or they're not really adamant about it. I would just say this to anybody, is just really, the key is, I think, just to obey the Lord and obey the Holy Spirit, because God is so genuine, I think that he has us in places for a reason. And so, like, I don't have to, especially when it comes to a neighbor. I think the biggest thing is like, Lord, what am I to do with this person? What am I supposed to share the gospel right now? Is there a time? Is that time right now? Or am I supposed to just love them and just bring them in, sharing meals, serving their family however I can, and just waiting for the right time? Because there really is a time. We've had some neighbors who have gone through some terrible tragedies, and prior to that, there wasn't a lot of conversation about the Lord. I didn't know where they were, but then they went through some really, really, really hard stuff with, losing a child, and our whole community was just shattered and just really broken about that, but for them, that was the thing that brought them to their knees. And, so there's a time for people, and the Lord, the Holy Spirit, is the one who does it. And so it has taught me a lot about taking my hands off, loving them, encouraging them, sharing tidbits when I feel is the right time, and just watching God do what God does.
Yeah. Yeah, God doesn't want he doesn't want our success. He wants our faithfulness.
Yes, absolutely.
Great Comfort on YouTube. He has a YouTube channel called Living Waters, and he does street preaching. And he does it he's been doing it for 4 years. And most of the time, street preachers that I see on YouTube, they're kind of up in people's faces, like really, really up in people's faces.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, but he does it in such a good way. Sometimes it is heated, but most of the time he does it in such a cool, he brings them in, but it's of their own free will. Like, sometimes he'll even be like a pop quiz. He'll be like, hey, like, what's the capital of France, or what's the capital of this country, or this continent, or whatever it is. And he'll ask a bunch of different geography questions, and then he'll be like, do you think you're a good person? Or he'll say like one other in between question, and then he'll be like, do you think you're a good person for $5? And that's where the conversation starts, and then he gets to have a one-on-one conversation with everyone else watching. So it's really, really fascinating. And that's one of the things he said was like, the Lord just wants us to be faithful.
Yeah.
He's not worried about us.
That's exactly right.
Ray's like, I've been doing it for 4 years. No one has come to know the Lord that I know of through this. I'm just planting seeds, right? That's like, when you hear different conferences, they're like, we had 5,000 people come to know the Lord. I'm like, I really hope so. I hope, but I see it as more of like planting seeds. Versus like, we know for certain. And I hope so that like those 5,000 people, right, for instance, that they are pushing them towards being part of a community, being part of a church, and not just, you're saved, goodbye,
Yeah. And you know what I would say to that, the planting seeds thing, can I just, everyone who's listening, I really want you to understand something. Sometimes we might have heard that, and it has kind of seemed like someone was saying that as like a cop-out. Or like, as like a way to validate their ministry. Like, we haven't seen anybody come to the Lord, but like, they're certainly planting seeds. Like, we've always heard the planting seeds thing is like, like our VBS wasn't a fail. We were just planting seeds, like people, where it sounds like it's like almost like you're trying to make up for something that, like, listen, if a farmer doesn't put down seeds, they don't get a harvest, period. That's it. So if you discredit seeds, then you do not understand the process. It is absolutely a process. And so every single thing that we do within our community, I rejoice. Like, Lord, thank you for these seeds that are being planted. Like, maybe in my mind, I wanted to see this. But a lot of times, and this is kind of getting into a different subject, but I think a lot of times we want success. not even really for ourselves. I think if we're being honest, for not for ourselves to say success, not even necessarily for like, ooh, they came to the Lord. But I think like deep down inside, there's this selfish thing that you want to know that you're being fruitful. You want to know that you're having an impact. So out of this like wanting to know that you are something, then we get frustrated when something doesn't happen. The results aren't the way that, if we don't have the testimony of they came to the Lord, then we're like, oh man, we feel like really bummed out. But that's why I think it's really important to get over yourself. Like I have to get over myself. I have to know that the Lord loves me. I have to know that He is pleased with me, and I have to know that that there is no, like you said, performance. Like there's nothing that's going to earn His love in anymore. And when you do it out of a place of assurance instead of out of a place of needing to know something for yourself, suddenly you stop getting offended. Suddenly you stop getting disappointed when it's not your timing. I got some friends now, and some neighbors now who, have had conversations, but it's like it's taking forever, But it's like, it's not for me. It's not about me. It's about them and their story. And so my job is to be consistent and to mourn when they mourn and to rejoice when they rejoice and to be there just consistently in their lives to be like, I'm not going anywhere, man, And when the Lord, when it's time, he will definitely make it happen, So we just started gardening a couple years ago, and I'll tell you what, man, we are learning that we are not very good gardeners in the natural, because I'm like, my garden, if you look at it right now, it is a mess. I got vines going everywhere. I got things that need to get pruned, so if that is a depiction of the kingdom and how much it takes when it comes to like, gardening and planting seeds and like tending to the garden and, giving it what it needs, like it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but the fruit comes at the end if you stick with it. So,
Do you think, kind of have a curious question. I don't want
yeah.
it to seem like a trick question or anything, but should there be more of an emphasis on sharing the gospel with those in the church versus those outside the church?
Sharing the gospel within the church, like you mean like people who are already saved?
Yeah, like those already who are inside, who are coming, but maybe are just coming because, and they need to be reminded of truth. And maybe there isn't a strong enough of a community in that church that is actually, and you're able to see through that and be like, whoa, my church really needs to be pressing into these, 6, 7, 8 people that are not, really absorbing what is being taught.
I think it just takes sensitivity into where people are, and I think that, I think I never apologize for the gospel being shared at church. I think we need it because I think not only for the people who are coming, like we'll share the gospel, just a very clear gospel message. If there's two people that are new to the congregation, I don't know where they are, it's worth it to me to share it, because what if they're not saved, I want them to have heard. But not only does it help them, but it also helps your congregation know how to share the gospel. Because the more that you watch people share the gospel, that's how you can learn how to do it yourself. And so I think it's an increasing, like, yes, share the gospel at church, share the gospel with your neighbors, and when it comes to with your neighbors, I want to be really clear, like, some of our neighbors have come. So can I back up a little bit and talk about? So I hope that answers your question about in the church. I think, it's good to share in the church. Like, they need to hear it over and over again so that they can share it, but also so they can be reminded. Because when we start to forget about what God did and the whole point of this whole thing, I think we can get into a mess of trouble. So yes, by all means, share. But when it comes to our neighborhood, so what we did was, so we had the table out in front, and we started meeting a lot of different people and stuff. And man, I'm telling you what, the love that I have for these people, I literally could cry right now, and it might happen, but I'm just going to try not to, because, for the sake of, everything sounding clear in the audio. But I just love these people. I mean, there's a couple of neighbors. It hasn't been like droves of people, but I'm saying, a handful of people out at the table, walking their dogs. And I told my wife, I said, we need to have a system in place. System sounds weird. We have to have a structure for our personal family life that invites these people. One day I was out on a walk and I was praying for this neighborhood. And when I got back to my house, I looked at my house, and it was almost like the Lord superimposed over my vision in front of my house a sign that says, "For God sets the lonely in families." And I was like, that's it. That's exactly what we're here for. And so we have to have a family structure that creates room. A lot of times we are so busy going from here to there, jobs, activities, and whatever. And I'm not saying all that's bad, but I'm saying we have to have room. And so what we did was we just purposed ourselves to say, okay, Saturday nights, as often as we can, we're going to open up. 6 o'clock, dinner at the Henrys. You're all invited. And so that way, when we meet new people, we say, hey, yeah, come on over. We're going to have people over. We're going to have some neighbors over. So it's a routine. Like people know that Saturday nights, it's Henry's. You know what I'm saying? We don't really get invites to go places on Saturday nights because people know Saturday nights, it's at the Henrys. You know what I'm saying? And so having that structure now, we were able to just, invite people, and they would come and, have a meal with us, and they would just hang out. And we would share testimonies. And I had this kind of vision of like, man, how cool would it be to have Christians that we love and who are just passionate about people in the same house with people who need to know Jesus. To me, that's like a grand experiment that's about to explode. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. So we would invite, Christian friends, and we'd have people who, didn't know the Lord who would come, or who knew of him but didn't really have a personal relationship with him. And they would hear testimonies, and they would hear and see that the church is really this beautiful group of people. It's not what you see on Facebook. It's not what you read about in the news. There's such a stigma now about the church, and a lot of it is something that we've earned because of the stupid things that we've said and done over the years. So, especially with like politics and 2020 and all that craziness that we just went through. I wanted to bring people into a place where they could see the real church of Christ. Instead of read about it in the news. I wanted to show them. And, and so I believe it happened. I believe that people got to see genuine love and genuine care, and relationships were built. And it's just a really strong, community that I would say that it's at our house. And we've shared the gospel with some people, but sometimes they just also hear it because they start coming to our, on Thursday nights, we have a meal at our house as well at 6 o'clock. And then we have a Bible study through our church, River's Edge, at 7 o'clock. But the meal is open to anybody who wants to come. And we tell people, like, if you want to just come for the meal, if it helps you just to like come by and not have to cook for your family, like, that's totally fine. You don't have to stay for the Bible study or whatever. But what has happened is a lot of times those people have come and they have stayed for the Bible study, so they might hear the gospel there, So with that, creating room in our lives where we just say Thursdays, Saturdays, people are going to know that they are invited. They always have a home to come to. I think that is a way that you could definitely wrap people up in the love of Jesus. And it just gives room to share the gospel in a natural way. I don't really like to, I want to be genuine when I share the gospel. And that's one thing that I have a hard time about. Not against people who do public ministry. I think there is definitely a place, and I've heard stories where, people are impacted by public ministry. And obviously Jesus had a public ministry. Like, to say anything about that is, I'm just saying where I feel called is I know Jesus to be a personable God, and he came to me. And so for other people, I want to be the same. I want to be personable, and I want to come to them. I don't want to expect them to come to church. To be honest, I don't really for me, I would much rather invite people into my home first, and then they come to church. Come to like a Sunday morning church. I would rather wrap them up in a loving community first, and then it would make sense that they would come to church. You know what I'm saying? Because really, the church is really essentially for edifying the believer worshiping together. And so sometimes I think it can kind of get lost in translation. We've got people coming who don't know the Lord and they don't really have community. It can be a hard fit. You know what I'm saying? Like you're coming to a place, you know nobody. They're all worshiping, and then for the love of God, heaven forbid you sing a song about the blood of the blood of the Lamb or something. And these people who have no, like, wait, what are we doing? We're singing about the blood of the Lamb, and I'm out of here, man. I don't know these
Right.
people. They're freaking me out. We're talking about the blood of the Lamb, and they want to bug out. And so I think a lot of that could be offset is if we actually bring them into our homes first and just love them and give them a context. And so that when they come, they have the freedom to ask questions like, hey, bro, I love church service today, but what was that song about the blood of the Lamb? What does that mean? You know what I'm saying? So I love relationship first and being personable with people, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. That's even like the current church that I'm going to. I've never had this type of community before where I feel like I'm living life with them.
Yeah.
It's not just we see each other on a Sunday for an hour or maybe a Wednesday. It's like, no, on a Tuesday or Thursday night for like 3 hours, right? We're going to hang out. And
Praise
it's late
God.
and everyone's tired, but they're committed to coming and they're disciplined to coming.
Yes,
And
that's
it's
awesome.
not out of like any sort of obligation, but they're like, they understand that it feeds their spirit. And they're like, even though I'm so tired, like I know I'm going to be refreshed when I come.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's really cool.
My
That's so good.
And how I found out about this church was my brother actually. He texted me like maybe this was 2-3 years ago, and he goes, "Hey man, you want to hang out with a bunch of 30, 40-year-old dudes at Culver's? We're just gonna go hang out and talk about the Bible." And I was like, "Okay, sure." He like name dropped a few people that I know, and I was like, "All right, fine." So I started
Yeah.
going, and it was 8 months of that. I didn't even go
Wow.
to their church. It was just 8 months of every Thursday and then some
Wow.
Tuesdays
What?
of just doing that. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then I was like, wait a second. If their church, right, if this is just a small portion of the local body that they're a part of,
Yeah.
I want to see what it's like. And so I started going. And, there was a little bit of pull from, some of my parents being like, no, you shouldn't leave our church. But I was like, but this is so cool. Like, I love the church I was going to currently, but I was like, this church has opened up a really cool space for me to ask all these questions that I've always kind of had and didn't even know I had until they started talking about certain topics. And then I was like, wait a second, what does this mean? If this is true, what does this mean? And when I go down like these like bunny trails, but like, I think you are right, man. There's this desire that we have for like instant gratification and instant results, And I think we all know when it started, but it started when we got a phone, right? When we were in 2 clicks, we could watch any sort of movie, watch any sort of YouTube video, learn how to, change your oil from the most basic thing to something really complex on your machine.
Yeah.
You know how to do it. You can look it up. Someone's got a 30-minute video, might be crappy audio or quality, but someone's got a video, right? About it.
Yeah.
And it can create this, I share the gospel once and they should convert.
Yeah.
It's like, was that the same for you though? I look at my own life and I was like, no, not at all. I grew up in a Christian home, but I wouldn't say I really became a Christian or took it seriously, I would say, until 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
But I've been living my whole life in a Christian environment, but it wasn't really becoming clean until I was asking those questions.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. So good too. Like, and I love what you said. Like, I definitely think our phones, I think our culture, even, you have things like the drive-through. It's like, I want it now. And you guys all know that sometimes we struggle with our Christianity when the drive-through ain't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And you're like, I've been in this line for 14 minutes. What is going on?
This is no longer fast food,
This is not fast food. We get really testy with it. But, with every invention that actually is a kind of a blessing to society, it speeds things up, it's convenient. We are trained and conditioned to expect faster results. And it's that's just how we roll. But that you can see that when you hold that up to a gospel that sows seeds and it comes to fruition in God's timing, like that's a direct kind of threat against that. if you don't have a perspective, because then you're going to have people who are harvesting and they're just like, what the heck, man, there's nothing to harvest here. Like they're just going to get burnt out and tired and exhausted. And it's like, man, how about you just slow down, share the love of Jesus with people, and let God be God. Let the Holy Spirit do what and I'm not saying that you can't share the gospel, but what I'm saying is, like, you can be tactful about how you go about that. You can wait and be really partnering with the Lord, because the Lord is one who, he really gets to the heart of things, and I've done enough podcasts. With our podcast, I listen to people's testimonies. And so we have 17 episodes now, or 16, 17. And the thing that I have learned, I'm so blessed by them, because I've learned for every single story, there was nobody, I don't think there was one person who was like, yeah, I was walking along a day, this person shared the gospel, I accepted the Lord, and then they discipled me. And then that was it. It was like a process. And it was like,
Yep.
this thing spoke to me, and then I saw this bumper sticker, and then I heard this, radio, show about this, and it was like so many different occurrences, and then also mixed with their personal experiences, and then maybe there was somebody who said something that really, all of a sudden things clicked, but that has helped me understand that they're truly, whenever I'm talking to a person, they are at a completely a place in their life that I do not know. I have no idea where they are. They could be primed and ready. This could be the first time that they're hearing the gospel. And so when I have an understanding and a bigger picture of that, then I stop getting offended when people don't respond. But I know that, having heard these stories, I know that it has happened. I know it happened for me, is that people hear little tidbits, they see different things, they see someone's example, and all of a sudden there's a point where it's like the lights turn on and they're like, whoa, I need Jesus. And so, man, it has literally been so freeing to me to know that every single person, even when we do ministry out in public, one of the ways that, and if you don't mind if I kind of go in this direction right now, just talking about sharing the gospel. One of the ways that we like to share the gospel is, a lot of times people call it a treasure hunt. I like to, I used to call it treasure hunt, but I like to just say partnering with the shepherd, walking with the shepherd. And so we, for our Bible study, we spent 3 weeks doing this, where we would meet, we'd have a meal, and then we would pray, and we'd earnestly pray, Lord, would you send us tonight where you are, where you want us to go? Let us partner with you, because I know that you, being a good shepherd, you're always pursuing people. And so, just take us to those places. And so we would just write down things that would pop up in our heart, and any descriptions of people that we felt like the Lord was saying. And we would have a list of items that we would go out and go to those places. And one of my favorite stories was we went. My son felt like we should go to Walmart, so we were going to go to Walmart. And when we were praying, I had this very, very clear picture of laundry detergent, green laundry detergent, and the words like spring, and I saw flowers and grass and all that stuff. And so we went to Walmart, because my son Dominic felt like we should go to Walmart, and then I was like, let's go to the detergent aisle, right? And so we go to the detergent aisle, and there's nobody there. But then this young gal comes around the corner right when we're there, and she goes and she starts looking at her detergent. And I go up to her, and I say, "Hey," I'm totally paraphrasing, because it was I can't. It's hard to remember exactly how things go, but I just said, "Hey, can we? Is there anything we can pray for you about?" And I just really feel compelled to pray for you. She kind of pauses, and she's like, "Whoa, that's kind of crazy. Why is that?" And I said, "Gosh, I'm trying to remember how this story went." But essentially, she's standing there, and I asked her, does she need prayer? And she's like, "Yeah, I'm just kind of struggling about stuff." She's like, "I used to know God, but I don't anymore." And I basically told her, I said, "Listen, we were praying at our house, and the Lord gave us a picture of coming to Walmart and then going to the detergent aisle." And I said, And she was like, "What? Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yes, like we're literally here for you." She's like, "Oh my gosh." So, and long story short, she starts talking about how she had like, ran away from the Lord, and she was a Christian for a while, but then she just like fell into some stuff. And we just talked to her about the prodigal son story and like the heart of the father and how he just welcomes her back. And, she's crying, we're crying, and she prays to recommit to the Lord. And I told her, by the way, I think that was actually the story of like, at that point I'd actually told her about the specifically the green detergent. Bro, the one detergent that she was going to buy was the only bright green detergent on the shelf that she literally had grabbed in the conversation. So
Come
she's
on.
holding, yeah,
Come
she's like,
on.
no, she didn't grab it. She was standing by it. So I took a picture of us. I did a selfie
That's
with us
awesome.
right next to, and I'm like, this is the God who goes after people. And so I love that when it comes to like public ministry, I really love to ask God where it's going to go, where we're supposed to go, who we're supposed to find, because I find that that's what Jesus did in so many ways. Like he only did what he saw the Father doing, and we're like, man, he had such a high success rate. Well, I think that if we really involve the Holy Spirit more with our evangelism or just going out to share the gospel, it doesn't always mean that we're going to have, more results that we want to see, because how many times did Jesus get rejected as well? But I think that we will see an increase of, whoa, that was divine timing, if that makes sense,
No, 100%.
dude.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna share a verse. Proverbs 36-9. This is something that my buddy texted me, I think almost a month ago now. And I kind of wanted to share it with you a little bit. So
Yeah.
it's talking about basically the temptation for selfish ambition.
Yes. Yeah.
And he says, so the psalmist is praying to the Lord. He says, "Two things I ask of you, deny them not to me before I die. Remove from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty or no riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or lest I be poor and steal." And I think about that because it's like, man, why, why do I think that riches are gonna like satisfy me? Like, why do I have that tendency to pull towards those earthly things that, like, yes, there are some Christians, right, who are kingdom builders, right, as sometimes we call them, or kingdom sowers or whatever, right, where they're given a lot, but they're giving a lot. Like they really are. Like as soon as it comes in, it's like, whoa, this is the ministry that I go to. This is the ministry that I give to, and I'm just kind of like, why? Why do we think that like Jesus is not enough? Why do we still look to other things to satisfy us?
I think it's for lack of knowledge of who he is. The older I've gotten, now I'm not that old, people, okay, but I'm older than I was a few years ago. All right, 37 years old. I have had enough time being around where I understand that wealth and riches is a perspective. And no, take that back. Wealth and riches it's relative. Like for me, I could look at my first home that was a 3-bedroom ranch, 1,200 square feet, compare it to my new home and be like, oh yeah, we're more wealthy now than what we were. But back then, like to me, that house. I've heard a story of one of our friends who had a house similar to ours. They had someone who was like a missionary from like another country, like third world country, come and stay with them, and they were like apologizing, like, sorry for this house, like it's so tiny, yada, yada. And they're like, don't you ever apologize. This is like a mansion, like this is beautiful. And I'm like, whoa, like that right there, like knowing how much of a spectrum wealth is, like my cheapest home that I've ever owned is like a palace for some people, and so and like that, like I think about like, man, if I were to do this and this, I could be making this much, but like the person down the street does this and they make like 5 times as much. It's like, why? What? It's kind of like what Solomon is like man, everything is meaningless.
Mm.
Like this chasing of poverty. Like, even if I were to get the wealthiest that I could ever be, there's still going to be somebody who's wealthier than me. So what am I pursuing?
Mm.
What am I going after? And so I find a lot of peace in just remembering how much of a spectrum wealth is, and finding contentment right where I am, knowing that I am so rich compared to so many people. And where my eyes always want to look for, like, okay, let's increase our income this way, let's increase our income this way. It's not bad to like want to increase your income, but what it's bad to make an idol out of it. It's bad to not slow down and live a Christian life with the people around you because you're so busy trying to just get more money. Does that make sense? Like, there is a calling that we have to love God and to love people. And so for me, it, like, wealth and the pursuit of happiness, those are all rights that we have, but like, just because it's a right doesn't mean that it's something that we should do.
Yeah.
Like, there's a very clear call in my life to minister to those around me. And that does mean slowing down and making room in space, which means that I can't go and work during those hours, or I can't go do this, but I actually have to make a meal. I actually have to go to the store and buy stuff for people. That's actually costing me money. You know what I'm saying? So I think that, like, when it comes to wealth and riches and stuff, like, it's always unto the Lord. And that we need to be really quick to turn it over to whatever the Lord wants us to give it to, whether it's hosting people, whether it's sowing into a ministry. I think that's how you keep a correct heart posture as the Lord adds to your wealth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's I believe it was the church in Ephesus. It's in chapter 2 of Revelation. And it's either them or it's the church right after them. But they are being persecuted, right, during this time. And they're actually losing their livelihoods because they're so bold for Christ that no one wants to be associated with them. They're like, and at that time, you needed other tradesmen to work together in order to be able to make an actual living. And so they were willing to jeopardize all their finances for the sake of Christ. And in the eyes of the world, they were poor, but they were very rich because they have Christ.
Yeah.
And like they were
absolutely.
like, and even that can be an encouragement of like, how can these Christians be so happy or still persevere even though they're so poor? What, it almost brings like a curiosity into, into like, wait, what the heck? How are they still being able to function through this?
Yeah, absolutely, man. That joy that the Lord gives. I heard a story. I told my kids a story recently about someone who I'm trying to. I hear so many different stories from so many different people all the time, and I can't always place them. But someone was telling me about how their time. It was actually someone from. Oh, it was Chris Baker. Chris Baker was telling me how he went to. We interviewed him for 180, and he went to. Oh shoot, was it Haiti? I don't remember where it was. It was somewhere where there was a lot of poverty, and I think it was after an earthquake. And he said he remember seeing. Forgive me if I'm telling this story wrong, Chris, but just seeing these people walking miles upon miles to just get water that we would never even consider drinking. Like, they would walk, 10 miles to get this water that was never even an option for us. Like, we would probably not even consider washing in it, let alone drinking it. And yet they were praising God. And for him, that was a revelation moment. Like, what am I missing? And that's where I think we ought to be. It's like, man, when people have Jesus, we are so rich. It's incredible. I always tell my wife, if I were to die tomorrow, I want everybody to know how rich of a life I lived, because I experienced more love, more joy, more fulfillment than many people do in a lifetime, just in my 37 years. And I always like to reassure, I'm not planning on dying tomorrow. But if that were to happen, I do want people to know that, man, there is nothing like being satisfied by Jesus. And that way, when finances, increase or decrease, you're unmoved by that. I always try tell Mary, I say, I want to be in a place where, like, man, because it can change in a dime. It could be just like in a moment where our financial situation completely changes. And now we are having to downsize, or we're having to move, or we're having to do this. We have to live on the streets, God forbid. Who knows what could happen? So I like to keep that in the back of my mind. Like right now, like I'm coasting and living and feeling very, very blessed, and the Lord is meeting every single need financially. But man, all the extra stuff that we have, all the little, the TVs and the couches and the basement, all the things that I love, man, I just want to hold it really loosely because it's the Lord's, and He could take away all of that. And actually, I invite Him to take that away if that ever becomes an idol in my life. If it's ever going to cause me to rely on myself, I'm like, Lord, please don't let me get to that point. I would rather be stripped of that and to have you than to live this life feeling comfort of the world instead of comfort of Christ, if that makes sense. And so I think we just got to really hold on to those things, enjoy them, be blessed by them, be thankful, but realize they're from the Lord, and let Him do what He wants to do.
What do you think about Christian celebrities?
Oh, yeah.
This is an interesting topic because, right, like there's a verse in a song by King's Kaleidoscope. It goes, should nothing of our efforts stand, no legacies survive, unless the Lord does raise the house, in vain its builders strive.
Yeah,
so I'm like, if I'm trying to build something for myself, what are you doing, dude? Like, it's all in vain. But if the byproduct of me pursuing the Lord, that He happens to bless me with riches, then that's great. Now I have more responsibility. It's not like there's any less pressure. There's less pressure financially, absolutely. But there's a lot more responsibility now. So like, what are your thoughts on being a Christian that becomes a celebrity or is pursuing that? And can you make Christianity a career,
Yeah. You know what? Praise God, because God will do what God wants to do. And, I love when He takes people and He raises them up into the eye of the public, and they love Him and they're submitted to God. And through that, it brings a lot of people to Christ because of their story, because of the way that they serve, And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with being, a celebrity in terms of, people knowing you as a Christian for what you do. And Jesus is a celebrity, man. He really was, like everybody knew Him. Not everybody liked Him, but those who did loved Him, and they were willing to die for them for the sake of preserving the gospel. People knew Him. Like the impact that Christ made, I always liken it to like, if we're standing at the edge of an ocean, somebody throws a pebble in the middle of it, that's not going to create a ripple that we're going to feel at the edge. If the ocean was completely still, no waves, somebody throws a little pebble in the middle, like by the time it gets to us, we're not going to even notice it, But Jesus created such a ripple that we are on the fringe. We're at the edge of the ocean, per se, in the terms of the timeline. We're like right here, and like Jesus was around, over 2,000 years ago. And it's like we are still feeling the waves of His impact. Like He was the celebrity of all celebrities, but not celebrity in the terms of how we think of a celebrity, when it comes to, physical riches and even physical beauty and just having all the things that you want. I mean, He was a celebrity through the way that He died and through the way that He rose again, through the way that He lived so sacrificially. And so I think that there are people who are, going to be celebrities just because of the way that they exemplify Christ's love. But I just think that we ought to be really careful and realize, kind of like what you said, it's like, what are we building on? I think some of the greatest people for the kingdom, we probably have never really heard about, to be honest, because they're just like undercover. It's like the people who just love people. They're just so invested in loving and caring for people and not making a name for themselves, not having a Facebook and putting it on Facebook, and not saying that's bad, but, not putting everything on TikTok or whatever it is. Like, all those things can be used by God, but I just think there's so many people out there that we don't even know about who are literally no-namers, except for like maybe the community in which they live, where they are completely kicking butt and taking names for Christ. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the type of celebrity that I want to be, one that is known for like being so Christ-like and so loving, but maybe like the rest of the world doesn't really know about it. You know what I'm saying? Like just known by the people that I interact with. That would be really, really cool. But I think it all comes down to your heart posture. You know, because honestly, you find out when people are celebrities for celebrity's sake and for themselves, usually it doesn't really end well. You know, that's where you start to see that there's a lot of cracks in the foundation, and you start to see ministries start to fall down and people having big moral failures, you know, because their foundation wasn't solid in the first place. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think that we ought to be really careful. When I was younger in my 20s, you know, I think I was really striving to be something as a Christian. Like I thought of like, man, it would be really cool to go and do this and go to this place and do this. I was really focused on like turning my Christianity into a career per se. And I think that so long as you're obeying the Lord, if he leads you to, you know, go and be a full-time missionary, full-time this or full-time that, then praise God. That's coming out of a proper response to God versus coming out of this feeling of I just want to build myself up as I want people to know me. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to feel like I've made it. You know, like you know what I'm saying? Like the reason why I made Wedding Day album was not because I wanted to get rich and famous off of an album. I wanted to share the songs that God gave it because I see it in Scripture that that's a biblical thing to do. When the Lord gives a songwriter songs, they're encouraged to share it because there's an edifying, there's a teaching component to it. And so we have Wedding Day that's, you know, that was made, and now it's a resource on YouTube that people can, you know, listen to, and all the song stories are there. And whether it gets, you know, some songs on there are like 300 views, some of them are like 3,000 views. It's like, I don't care about the views. I mean, it's exciting to see when something is picking up views, but what I care is about being obedient. I know that I did what the Lord wanted me to do, and I know that it's a resource there for people to be, you know, encouraged by. And so I know that album came out of a right heart, not out of a motivation to get discovered, if that makes sense.
I love it. Ryan Henry, ladies and gentlemen, if people want to stay up to date on the things you're doing, where should we send them?
Oh, man. So things that I'm doing?
Yeah.
Well, you can you can email me and we can always chat at rhenry526@gmail.com. That's you can also check out 180podcast.com if that's cool for me to share that. That's ONE80podcast.com. You can listen to all the podcast episodes, which I just highly recommend to listen to it and listen through the with a kind of a filter of what was the church doing in these people's lives. And that's such a great way to learn how to be the salt and light when you listen to other people's stories, okay? You can also, like I said, you can check out Wedding Day. We actually have our own YouTube channel where I think it's like 25 of our album videos, song stories are all, posted on YouTube. But yeah, aside from that, you know, you want to check up with me, I'm down. I love to talk to new people, meet new people, and you know, just to talk faith and life and all that stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, bro. Thank you so much for being here. It was great, and I really hope that everybody was encouraged, and it's just awesome to see what you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks, bro.
Peace, man.
What's happening, people? Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, then press here for a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last few weeks. And consider subscribing. Peace.